following episode most likely contains graphic language, details of violence, and murder, and may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 61 of Murder with My Mother, the true crime podcast, where I talk murder with my mother.
Hey, everybody.
What's up, Mom? How are you?
I'm pretty good. I've had a hell week, but it's hump day, so that's good.
It's hump day. Hump day into the weekend before Christmas.
Yeah, I keep being weirded out by that. Like, I keep thinking that it's like a couple weeks away, and then I think, like, even when we're planning what to get for the dinner and when to go shopping, and I'm like, oh fuck, that's like in a couple days we got to do that shit.
And I got a shit-packed weekend with my daughter's birthday party and all of that fun stuff that goes along with that, on top of all the Christmas cheer.
It's your own fault for fornicating close to Christmas.
True. Well, not really. She was due in January.
Oh yeah, true.
Remember? But you know how that goes. So
yeah,
she's always beats to her own drum.
Yeah, she's unpredictable for sure.
But yep, Christmas is fast approaching. So
ho ho ho.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it. And then New Year's, and then we're into 2025. I'm sure everyone will have a, can't believe that I can't believe it, because I can never believe anything. But
I feel like maybe I'm too tired for New Year's.
Yeah. Well, if you don't celebrate, it's still going to be New Year's. So
yeah, fair enough. Doesn't just pause.
Just have a nap and wake up in the new year. Whatever. Feel fresh and rejuvenated. I don't know if even that happens anymore.
I don't think I ever feel rejuvenated anymore.
I don't think I ever will feel rejuvenated again. So happy New Year's. Oh, yeah. Big yawn. But as we approach the end of the year, we wanted to take a moment to address a heartbreaking reality in Canada. One that is all too familiar on our podcast and in this beautiful country of ours. The countless families that are left without answers or accountability when it comes to the justice system. Too often we hear stories of killers walking free or receiving shockingly lenient sentences for unimaginable crimes, or having to face the killer of their loved one every so often while they plead for parole. It's a system that, time and time again, fails those who are grieving the loss of their loved ones. Families are left to pick up the pieces, driving themselves to exhaustion in their search for truth, justice, and closure, fighting battles that shouldn't be theirs to fight.
Yeah, so we've covered some of these families and cases on this podcast, and their stories really stick with us. Their pain is a reminder that change is desperately needed. So today we want to end the year with an episode dedicated to shining a light on some of these unresolved cases, amplifying the voices of those seeking justice, and discussing what needs to change in Canada's criminal justice system. This episode is for the families, the victims, and for anyone who believes that accountability and justice should be more than just words. Let's just start this conversation.
Well, and it's not we're just starting. We have talked about this forever, but it might be annoying. But if it's annoying, don't listen. But
it's annoying until you find yourself in the position.
Exactly. And we feel so deeply for these families that it's not their burden to bear. It shouldn't have to be. And we've touched on this in a lot of our cases. We have brought you guys a few unsolved cases. And I know the bulk of true crime people don't like to listen to unsolved cases because there's no resolution. But again, this is like Groundhog Day. Imagine living this as your life, right? So the case today, we are going to go over, there are 3 separate cases that we will be discussing. And some of these are completely unsolved. One is unresolved, but it is pretty apparent as to what has happened in that case. And another one of the cases, we actually stumbled upon while we were doing the research on another case and kind of started to link things together, Mom and I, just being like, hey, doesn't this and this and this and this and this seem like they are all connected? And as we dug deeper, there are people who have connected the cases, but there are some other things that had happened that basically loopholes in our justice system that won't allow the person and the perpetrator to be named. So with that, we will hop right into this episode. So the first person that I wanted to discuss, the first case, is the case and the disappearance of Devon Goodrick. So Devon Goodrick has been missing since Friday, September 24th, 2021 from Langley, British Columbia, which is our backyard. So although Devon is still considered missing, it is very clear that there has been foul play, as it is unlike Devon to not contact his family and friends for even one day, let alone for 3 years. At the time of his disappearance, Devon was expecting a child, working a good job, and just moved into a nice place. Devon came home from a work trip and went to grab some beer at a liquor store near his house. That's where he bumped into 3 males that he had known when he was younger, but he had not seen these guys in years. His sister Nikki, so side note, Nikki is the epitome of strong and probably the best sister to be doing what she's doing. Like we follow her on social media. She has amassed quite a following, obviously, because for 3 years she has been trying to fight for justice for her brother.
And she lets nothing stop her.
No, not fear, not any kind of, fear of retaliation or fear of anything. She is basically completely straightforward with who she knows in her heart is responsible for her brother's disappearance. On our podcast, obviously, we are not going to name names because you are innocent until proven guilty. And I'm doing my air quotes. I know you guys can tell with my voice, but basically, him and his sister were inseparable. They had a very tumultuous childhood. They were best friends, call it a trauma bond, call it, whatever it was. They were together every day. They spoke multiple times a day. They were the best of friends. So Devon had told his sister he had Snapchatted when he ran into these guys at the liquor store, and she instantly had a bad feeling. One of the males had just gotten out of jail for a violent offense, and having similar, a common group of, they knew the same people. They had known that he was just out of jail. One of them had been heard telling anybody that would basically listen that he hated Devon and he wanted him dead and that he would kill him himself if he ever saw him. So obviously getting this Snapchat really worried Nikki. So she offered to pay for an Uber to bring Devon to where she was, but he insisted, don't worry, they're just my old friends. We're going to go play some pool and have some beers or whatever.
But by the next morning, Devon was missing and no one had seen or heard from him. His sister Nikki immediately started trying to reach out to the 3 men he had been with the night before. Nikki was finally able to track down the youngest of the 3. He was shaking, staring at the ground, and claimed he was so drunk that he couldn't remember anything. He took them to the spot where Devon supposedly got out of the car, but she could tell he was lying. Another one, who had recently been released from prison, claimed they dropped Devon off in the middle of nowhere near 192nd and 28th with a dead phone. As Nikki was discussing this with him, his mother started realizing the severity of the situation and spoke up saying, why were you and those 2 guys thoroughly cleaning the vehicle Saturday morning? A few days later, why were you guys doing that? A few days later, the main person with intent to harm Devon had met with his sister. He wore all black with a mask, a hood, and his hand in his waistband.
Like obviously trying to say,
he was trying to be threatening to her.
Yeah, he was trying to intimidate her, but she was not intimidated.
No, I don't think she's not intimidatable.
No,
for sure.
No.
She begged him for an hour to tell them where Devon's body was, but he showed no emotion and no remorse. She just knew. She had a feeling.
Yeah, especially as soon as she saw the Snapchat that she knew Devon was with these guys, she got a bad feeling.
And she's posted the Snapchat too, so she's just trying to get answers. Mm-hmm. What made things worse was how much evidence there was and how little the police did with it.
That's very familiar.
Yep, very. We know the police have their hands tied by the crown, but this is blatant and it's so obvious.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Mom's getting a phone call.
And that's my brother. He always has the best timing.
As he does.
And she learned that one of their mothers was also found cleaning the car Devon had been in with bleach and Pine Sol late into the night. The car was later found burnt to the ground.
And this was a Mercedes SUV.
Yeah, so someone's just going to burn a Mercedes for no reason. A Snapchat was saved to Devon's snap roll showing all of these guys in a car with him listening to a song about murder and telling him, someone telling him to fucking delete that. And this was the last time Devon's phone pinged, but he knew to save that to his Snapchat album.
Yeah, which obviously, if you had a sister,
he had a feeling.
And if you had a sister like your sister, you know she's going to go to the ends of the earth for you. He obviously had a feeling that something was going to happen to him. So for him to save that in his Snapchat. And the video is very eerie. You can go to Nikki's TikTok. It's Nikki Goodrick. And you can go and look at all these videos and get all the information and make your own opinion, which will not be hard for you to come to the exact same conclusion.
Yeah, it's very obvious.
Yes. So the family has been left to their own devices. Like I said, TikTok, they have started a petition for change in this country and justice reform on change.org, which we will link in the episode notes. Nikki has been very vigilant on social media in fighting for her brother. Because when someone is so blatantly guilty, they should at least be questioned. They haven't even taken these people in for questioning. And one of them was underage. That was the brother of the person who is suspected of being the quote unquote mastermind behind Devon's disappearance.
And he was the first one she spoke to, right?
Yeah, but I don't know if any of these people have ever watched The First 48. If you offer them good food and you scare them a little bit, they will talk to you.
Yeah.
But now that it's been 3 years, this who was once a boy is now turning into this hardened criminal looking kid. And obviously, when you see something traumatic like that, or you're involved in something traumatic like that, because when Nikki had met him to talk, he had tears in his eyes and basically said, I didn't know it was your brother, because she used to babysit this boy.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's just all very obvious, very blatant. And especially, like I said, we know how easily people crack, especially young people and especially right away. But the police did not bring them in for questioning. So Devon Goodrick has still not been found, and his family remains hopeful that they will receive the answers they need to bring him home and to lay him to rest. The family is offering a $10,000 reward for information that leads to his whereabouts. Devon Goodrick was last seen, apparently, at 3:30 a.m. on September 25th, 2021 in the area of 192nd Street and 28th Avenue in Surrey. If you have any information on the disappearance of Devon Goodrick, you can call IHIT at 1-877-551-4448.
And we know that there are a lot of people that know about this, and there are a lot of people that the perpetrators have spoken to. And you may have heard something. You may have heard, there's a word on the street big time with this one.
Yeah.
And I mean, this one, we feel like a difference can very, very easily be made with people coming forward and calling the number and saying what they heard, what they know.
Yeah, and you can even call Crime Stoppers and remain anonymous. So we will link the Crime Stopper number at the end of the episode. But anything you know, maybe it's something you saw, you heard, maybe you don't even think it's that important, but it is. And to this family, that will make a world of a difference if they can bring him home and lay him to rest.
It's everything to them.
Yeah. So another case that we were going to talk about is the unsolved murder of Mayvette Monzon in Vancouver in 2005. So, Mom?
So this one has kind of captured our interest for a while. Mayvette Monzon was a popular and charismatic 31-year-old bartender working 4 separate bartending positions around the Lower Mainland. And this was the time that I was I was up in the club. I may have been a little bit too old to be there, but I was still having a lot of fun. So I'm sure that I probably crossed paths or had the odd drink served to me too by Mayvette. She is described as a vivacious, loving person with a smile that made everyone feel better. She was a daughter, a sister, and a friend that would do anything for anyone she cared and loved. She was very bubbly and outgoing, social and loving, which was great for her job.
Oh, Mom, like, you ready to have a flashback?
Yeah, totally.
The clubs that Mayvette worked at included the Fever nightclub on Church Street in New Westminster, which I've also been there. That made it into my time. Maybe I started a little young.
Such a hillbilly crossover.
Yeah, great. Cheers, right off of Scott Road and 70th Avenue in Delta. Capitol nightclub on Elmridge Way in Richmond. And Barcode nightclub on West Broadway in Vancouver. Mayvette was also a proud member of the tight-knit Filipino community in Vancouver. She was also a big fan of Dachshunds, owning 5 of them. So she had 5 dogs, 5 little Dachshunds.
She lived with her mother, Juliet, in the 1400 block of West 53rd Avenue at Granville Street. After finishing her shift on September 23rd, 2003, Mayvette drove home in her black Honda Civic. Sometime between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., Mayvette was fatally shot while sitting in her vehicle outside of the home she shared with her mother. Her mother had heard her 5 dogs barking, but assumed it was Mayvette coming home. And at that, she always came home early in the morning. And the next morning, no one noticed Mayvette in her car until later in the day when one of her family members located her in the vehicle. How terrible is that?
Yeah, and I think it was one of her nieces or nephews.
Oh.
And she was saying, like, something's wrong with my auntie, so, yeah. And her mother was actually a nurse. So now she's retired, but because now she has to fight for justice for her daughter, which I'm sure, juggling both of that. But when she went to the car, she went in the car and propped Mayvette up and saw her hair was all wet with blood. And she said that the look on Mayvette's face, even after she passed away, like she had her eyes closed tightly, like she looked afraid.
Like she knew what was coming.
Yeah. So in 2007, the Vancouver Police Department did offer a $10,000 reward for any information that led to the arrest of the individual or individuals responsible for the death of Mayvette. Authorities released a statement that they believed the murder was planned. By 2009, Mayvette's mother and sister had lost hope that the VPD would be able to find answers, instead turning to a private investigator. Now, they assumed right away, because Mayvette, why would she be shot in her car? The family thought that right away this would be solved. They didn't expect it to continue to be unsolved. And in 2014, Mayvette's mother shared a photo album with a reporter from the Vancouver Sun to try to bring more exposure to her case. The photo album had been provided to the VPD as evidence originally, but the reporter for the Vancouver Sun recognized something surprising. Now, although Mayvette did not live a high-risk lifestyle, her occupation had put her dangerously close to those with gang affiliations.
Among the photos included were images of known gang members, including Suk Dok
Maybe I should take over.
and Manny Hayran, known gang members who were later killed in targeted shootings in 2012 and 2013. Others included this name I got, Patrick Avery, Plowman, who was involved in a brutal beating and stabbing 4 years after Mayvette's murder. A group photo showed the smiling bartender surrounded by UN gang members, the United Nations gang, including Sal Shabazz, who was fatally shot in Mexico in 2012, and Barzan Tilly Choli, who later pled guilty to a murder plot between 2008 and 2009. This information was a shock to Mayvette's mother.
Mm-hmm.
In 2015, Crime Stoppers once again appealed to the public. Despite this, no charges or arrests have ever been made in regards to Mayvette's murder. Mayvette continues to be missed by the tight-knit Filipino community and by her loving family. Her mother has fought tirelessly for almost 20 years for the answer. Don't you know that I have been in agony until now? Just come forward. I beg of you before I die. I don't want to die without closure from my daughter.
A letter from Mayvette written to her family was found after Mayvette's murder. There were instructions from Mayvette written on the sealed envelope to open on August 8th, 2004, which was just over a year before she was killed. The contents of the letter said, There was a warning tonight of a fatal bar fight, but I still had to go to work to make money. We have higher security tonight. Police are informed and will be there tonight. If something should happen to me, I love you all very much. If I die, call," and then she named a man's name, "and tell him you're my mom and he owes you $100,000 for my accidental death because he guaranteed my safety. It's his fight. He gave me his word nothing would happen to me." So according to Mayvette's mother, she had absolutely no idea that Mayvette was surrounded by people who were so dangerous. And I think if she would have found that letter before Mayvette was murdered, she probably wouldn't have even allowed her to go. But Mayvette was 31. Obviously, she did what she wanted to do and she was going to be at the places that she was going to be at. But I think when you're surrounded by things that could be dangerous, yes, that could be one thing. But usually when you take a bigger look at the picture, it's not always as it seems. So according to Mayvette's mother, she also said that a lot of the bouncers were in some pretty high profile biker gangs. And just, I think that that's when you work in the nightlife, you're going to be surrounded by people like that, especially when you're, very attractive and very vivacious. And everyone that described her said she was so friendly. When you go to the bar and you're a gangster and you're just friends with the bartender, it doesn't necessarily mean that she had any knowledge of what was going on, had any knowledge of how, big time or whatever any of these guys were. And most of these people were murdered after Mayvette was murdered years later, 6, 7, 8 years later.
Well, I can honestly say, during that time and a little bit before then, I was in a bar in Vancouver when shots were fired. It was a time where there was a lot of gang activity going on in the bars.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. That was the time in 2005, 2006, 2007. I mean, that was when the Surrey 6 shooting happened. There were 7 separate shootings of people in broad daylight, in the middle of a mall, in the middle of parking lots, underground parking. People were really just going, they didn't care about public safety at all. So if you have any information regarding the homicide of Mayvette Monzon, please contact one of the following: either the Vancouver Police Department at 604-717-3321, that is their tip line, or to remain anonymous, you can call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. Now, there's obviously going to be discussion of why Mayvette was targeted. And like we've discussed, she was around some pretty dangerous people and she was involved in, working in these places that these people would be. But if you think about it, following her home and killing her in her vehicle when they could have, if it is something where it's to do with the club, maybe it would have happened at the club.
Yeah, or outside the club, or, to go to her house, that makes it a lot more intimate.
Yeah,
and
that
to
was
follow
definitely
her to
targeted.
Even, the person could have been lying in wait also, which would have meant they knew where she lived.
Exactly. And so for me, and Mom and I have been discussing this, that screams passion to me.
Yeah.
To lie in wait or follow somebody to get them when they're alone. I really think that the gang stuff, they don't care who's around. They don't care where you are. They don't care the circumstance. They will kill you as you're sitting there having a coffee right on the middle of a busy street. They don't care.
Well, and she's also just a bartender. She's not
exactly.
Another high level gang member.
Exactly. And that's the lengths you see them go to for things like that. Other rival gang members or things but the bartender of 4 separate nightclubs, I really don't see that happening. So for me, it does scream that there's something else. It's deeper, whether it be a scorned lover or a partner of someone maybe that she, had connection to, jealousy. For me, that's what it screams.
I agree.
They had contacted her boyfriend, and I guess her boyfriend was on his way home from Nigeria at the time. And another, thing, she was with another man, but he was, I guess, hadn't left his wife yet. And it's just, there's so many things. So again, if you have any information, even if you think that it might be irrelevant, reach out to Crime Stoppers, call call them and just let them know what you have.
And I think also at this point, like those of us that were involved in that lifestyle, and I'm not saying I was involved in like going all the time, but that's debatable, but people have grown up at this point in life, and, you know, unresolved feelings for the family would be priceless. I mean, They've lived with this for long enough.
Yeah. So the other cases that we wanted to cover kind of all came to us very...
Yeah, they found us.
Found us, yeah. So between April 1988 and August 1990, a serial killer murdered 6 sex trade workers and dumped their bodies in the laneways of Vancouver. Officially, the murders are unsolved, and 2, Lisa Gavin and Glenna Sowan, were just added to the Vancouver Police Department's cold case website in 2022. Although these cases remain officially unsolved, 2 retired detectives who worked on a joint RCMP VPD task force called E-Alley to have a podcast where they take us through the whole investigation. And they say they know who killed these women, and he died in 2007. So Rose Minnie Peters was the first of the Alley murders. She was strangled, beaten, and raped. Her body was left in a lane behind the 4900 block of St. Catharines on Easter Sunday in 1988. Rose was a 28-year-old Indigenous woman from Port Alberni. 10 years before her murder, she was shot in the neck by a police bullet as she walked too close to the scene of a bungled robbery. Rose was left partially paralyzed with a slight limp. Shortly after she got out of the hospital, she moved to the downtown east side and began using the street drug called Talwin, an addictive prescription drug used as a substitute for heroin. The second woman, Lisa Marie Gavin, was found dead in an alley. She was 21 years old, and she was also strangled, beaten, and raped. Her body was found in a lane behind Knight Street and East 49th on August 13th, 1988. Lisa was born in a prison hospital addicted to heroin. She lived with a family in Richmond from the time she was a few months old until just after her 9th birthday. Lisa's foster sister Sharon Tourlings says she was great. She was a great kid. She was a funny kid. She loved horses. She would walk up to Shadow, who I'm assuming is a horse, and hold onto his leg, and that old horse would just walk around the corral with the kid on his leg. Lisa had no fear. It was a wonderful, happy childhood. We had it all, and then we didn't. Glenna Marie Sowan. Just over 6 weeks after Lisa was murdered, the body of her best friend, Glenna Sowan, 25, was found strangled, beaten, and left behind a house on West 24th Avenue. An Indigenous woman, Glenna was born in High Prairie, and at the time of her death, had a baby daughter who was 4 months old and living with her mother in Alberta. Tracey Lee Chartrand, who was 25, was last seen in early October of 1988. Like her friends, Lisa and Glenna, she was a habitual cocaine user and resorted to sex work to pay for her drugs. When her body was found 6 months after her murder, it was a shallow grave at the UBC Endowment lands. Originally from North Vancouver, Tracey was separated from her husband and had a son. Frances Annie Grant. Like Tracey, Frances Annie Grant grew up in North Vancouver. She had been off the streets for about a year, but was back about a month before her death, working the Broadway stroll. Annie knew Lisa, Glenna, and Tracey. Her body was found in a shed behind a Mount Pleasant rooming house on June 4th, 1989. The sixth alley murder victim was Karen Taylor. She was a bubbly 19-year-old from Ontario. On the night that she died, she had been out with friends at the Cecil Hotel on Granville Street and left with a girlfriend to get pizza. It's not clear whether a man had followed them from the pub or if she had met him there, but she left with him, and her body was found in a Shaughnessy Lane on August 24th, 1990. At the Missing Women Inquiry in 2012, retired RCMP Inspector Don Adam and the officer in charge of the task force said that the E-Alley investigation led to the discovery of a serial killer responsible for the alley murders. But because he died during the investigation, he was not charged and his name has never been made public. So these officers and investigators are super certain that this is the person. So why not test his DNA, test his family's DNA? I understand he's deceased, but
but the answers are not deceased. Like the families are not deceased.
Exactly. They all need, and her, one of the victims, her foster sister has said like multiple times, like these women, yes, they were in a bad place in their life. They were obviously working in a dangerous profession, the oldest profession in the world, but it's so much more that pulls them to that, right? They are not just sex trade workers. These women are mothers and daughters and sisters and cousins and friends, and they are just in a bad circumstance, right? It doesn't mean that these people are, you can just murder them and throw them in an alley and then die and nobody's ever going to know that you did this. That's not what it should mean. So I am a strong believer that there needs to be changes in our justice system that are going to help bring peace and resolution to these families. And at least, obviously, it's not going to bring their loved ones back, but at least we need answers for them so that they're not driving themselves crazy. And if you know who did something and you know that this person is the person responsible, name them, apprehend them.
And that's just it. Like, how twisted is it that we have... In our justice system, we are more protective of the people that have done these actions because they haven't had a right to a trial because they're dead. Yeah, they're dead. They don't give a shit. Like, whatever. They did these terrible things
when they were alive.
And when this person died, the alley murders stopped. So, test the DNA. If you're so worried about wrongly accusing someone who's dead, then do a DNA test.
Exactly. Now we have so much where we've touched on in multiple episodes. We have genetic genealogy, which even if he has one living family member, it would be easy enough to see the connection. And if this person, and also as the family of that person, I'm sure they don't want to know, but I would. If one of my family members was out there committing murders and then died and we're all like, oh, we miss him, he's great. Like, no, he was murdering women for no reason except for his own probably sick, sexual, twisted fucking, I don't even know. But again, why we're so into true crime is because I can't wrap my head around what most of these people do. So at that time when these murders were happening, like obviously we know that there was multiple serial killers at work in these times, and one of them being Robert Pickton. But the scary thing is that Robert Pickton was just one of 374 suspects in the murdered and missing women inquiry. Like
that's like, digest that for a second. 374.
Yeah.
And, in this area that we consider to be a safe area.
Yeah. So I think there are obviously some things that need to be changed, right, in our justice system. So some of our, and we're going to call them manifestations for 2025 and for the criminal justice system, is we want to really see changes made, right? And as per usual, like I want to address the issue that deeply impacts our communities. The state of our criminal justice system in Canada is fucking shit. So while the current system aims to balance rehabilitation and punishment, there is a growing concern that it often fails to adequately hold criminals accountable for their actions. Many Canadians feel that justice is not being served when repeat offenders are released early or when sentences fail to reflect the severity of the crime. This raises an important question. Should our justice system shift its focus from rehabilitation to punishment to better protect society and ensure that these offenders face the consequences of their actions? I believe it's time for meaningful change, and by enforcing stricter sentences, reforming bail policies, and prioritizing the rights of victims, we can hopefully restore public trust in the justice system. Our goal is to shed light on why these changes are necessary and how they can create a safer, more just society for all Canadians. So let's dive into these critical reforms and explore the steps that would be needed to bring about a more effective and accountable criminal justice system. So here are some of the points that are advocating for a shift in the Canadian criminal justice system. 1, we need harsher sentences for serious crimes.
Well, because without that, everybody knows that it needs to be changed.
Everybody.
And without it, more bad things will just keep happening.
Yeah, they need to introduce mandatory minimum sentences for violent crimes and repeat offenders. And they need to eliminate parole opportunities for those convicted of severe offenses.
Yeah, like maybe someone will think twice if they reform bail policies.
Yeah.
Restrict bail eligibility for individuals charged with violent crimes or repeat offenses. Implement stricter conditions for release to reduce the risk of reoffending while awaiting trial. Put some accountability in sentencing.
What
a novel idea.
Yeah.
Ensure sentences are proportional to the severity of the crime and its impact on victims. And I get that everyone does the time served thing.
Yeah, but
for these types of crimes,
you should not have
giving people that are waiting, because our court is so broken with the wait also, the time that it takes for these people to get to court, and then you're going to give them double the time served.
And then they also get that Jordan law or whatever, where it's like, they didn't bring it swift enough, so you're
unfair to this killer. Ugh. So increase transparency in plea deals to prevent lenient outcomes for serious crimes.
And they really need to reduce the focus on rehabilitation for certain offenders, like limiting access to rehabilitation programs for offenders who commit heinous or violent acts. Obviously, yeah, you should probably get counseling and therapy when you're in jail, but that doesn't mean that you're
behavior.
Better now. Let's get out and go reoffend.
Everyone knows that if you behave yourself and don't get caught doing too much shit, because everyone's doing stuff in prison, that you're going to get out early.
All criminals, right? Yeah. Redirect resources from rehabilitation programs towards enhanced security and incarceration facilities. Invest in our correctional facilities. We need to expand and modernize prisons to accommodate longer sentences and prevent overcrowding, and also implement stricter monitoring within facilities to reduce privileges for offenders. And we also need a victim-centered approach. We need to prioritize the rights and needs of victims over offenders' rehabilitation, and implement policies that ensure that sentences reflect the harm that has been caused to these victims and their families.
Because people that are affected by these things, once the person that hopefully does what they did to their family members goes to jail,
hopefully if they even investigate it,
or even if they even get caught, then the family of the victims is just left to deal with this on their own. There's some victim services, but it doesn't go, the rights of the person that created this whole situation way outweigh the families of the victims.
You chose to commit this heinous criminal act. Even like what we discussed on our last episode, Paul Bernardo. Why does he need to come up for, he literally
needs to fuck off. He needs to just not ever be heard from again. He did these things.
Yes.
He's caught doing these things on video.
Yes.
Fucking throw the key away.
And also, why are people being charged, when you're sentenced, why is it always 25 years to life? Why can't it just be life?
Yeah.
There are so many states. And again, we know people have different opinions on the criminal justice system here as opposed to the criminal justice system in America. I think we need to meet in the middle. I'm all for the death penalty, but that's if, it's concrete. This person 100% did it. There's video evidence of them doing it. I think someone like Paul Bernardo or Luca Magnotta or people like that need to be Robert Pickton. Obviously there's layers to that, but all these people should have been eligible to stay their whole life in jail with no chance of parole ever.
Yeah, because even 25 years to life, that never means someone's whole life unless they get cancer while they're in there.
Yeah.
That's the only hope that anyone has of staying in for life at this point.
Yeah. So legislative reforms to reevaluate the principles of the Corrections and Conditional Release Act to emphasize public safety over rehabilitation, which will strengthen the laws to close those loopholes to allow for early release or lenient sentencing. And there should really be a zero tolerance for repeat offenders.
100%.
We should introduce stricter penalties for individuals who reoffend, particularly in cases of violent crimes or sexual crimes or things where you probably shouldn't be doing that in the first place. You're probably not going to get rehabilitated. We should implement a 3 strikes law leading to life sentences for habitual offenders. And we should really increase the law enforcement powers. I mean, this one, obviously, yes. I think that a lot of the times the police have their hands tied because of the Crown and, it goes much more above. Obviously, the police have powers where they can charge people and do all of that, but they really have their hands tied because of all of these loopholes in the criminal justice system.
Well, and if the Crown is refusing to press charges because they think don't have enough evidence, the police 100% have their hands tied. And that's what a lot of families will say, like that they believe they know who did it. They believe in what you're saying who did it. They believe all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it goes up the chain to a certain point where the Crown stops it and says, well, we don't have enough for a trial.
And so that's why they really need to equip law enforcement with more tools to ensure that swift arrests are made and that there's actually convictions. And by expanding surveillance and monitoring of individuals with a history of criminal behavior, like we've talked about this before, when the guy who murdered his pregnant wife got out and it's like, hey, you're not allowed to drink. You're not allowed to have be alone with an intimate partner. How, who, and when, and what the fuck? Who is going to
Nobody does it.
Patrol that?
Nobody patrols it.
How about these offenders that literally have gotten out on bail and then the next day they do something even worse? Who is Jatin Patel?
Yeah.
That motherfucker was literally fondling young girls in a grocery store, murdering people, smoking meth with 13-year-olds.
In his halfway house.
In his halfway house. So clearly nobody is monitoring these people.
What about the person that lived in our coach house that we, was supposed to be, he just got out of jail and he was supposed to be on bail.
Yeah.
And he didn't even tell his probation officer where he was even living.
God, you're here now. It was like, what?
Yes. We've seen this firsthand.
Mm-hmm. And so we need public confidence back in our justice system. So we need to reform these policies to align with the public demands for justice and deterrence. We need to deter these criminals from committing these crimes. If it's like, oh, if you do this, you're just going to get a slap on the wrist and time served, and you'll be out in a couple years. It's like that is almost like an investment to them. That's worth it. So we also need to communicate the importance of punitive measures to restore faith in the criminal justice system. So I really believe, and Mom, I know you're the same, we believe that these changes would aim to strengthen public safety and emphasize accountability for criminal actions. However, it is essential to weigh these policies against concern about civil liberties, recidivism, favorite word, and broader societal impacts.
I mean, the thing is that, I don't know, it's so disheartening. And, we've been in touch with so many families that this becomes their whole entire life.
Identity.
Whole identity.
Yes. It's fighting there's so many families I can think of just off the top of my head.
Jeff Buziak is just in having surgery and he's should be on his thinking about his own healing.
Yeah.
But he's still posting about his daughter, Lindsay, being murdered.
Because she was. And it's that's
and
not
he
something.
Can't get anywhere with it.
No. And that's why things need to change in our country. And I'm hoping we're on all these manifestations we're making on Murder with My Mother. We're hoping that they actually become our reality soon because this is getting out of hand. So we just wanted to obviously dedicate this episode to any of the families that we have covered on any of our episodes this year, especially those with unresolved cases. We know that these are not the only families going through this. We know we receive so many messages of all different walks of life and different crimes committed by different people, but yet the common denominator is most of these people are free to live their life while the victim is not able to do that. So we want to just take this time to obviously kind of talk about some of those families and just mention them. And off the top of my head, I mean, the most recent episodes we've done, the murder of Devon Bell, which remains unresolved and unsolved, unsolved in air quotes. The murder of Lindsay Buziak, which again, most of these cases have a pretty blatant suspect. Like they know.
Well, yeah, they all go in a certain direction. It wasn't just like nothing has come up.
Yeah. Trina Hunt. I want to take some time. I'm still seeing the $50,000 reward posters for her. Her family needs answers, and we know there's a couple lying cunts around. So we just want to, weed them out. There is the family of Devon Goodrick, who we discussed today. His sister has her whole TikTok, her whole social media is dedicated to finding justice for her brother. So obviously I've been in contact with them, with the family. I've given them some resources. Hopefully, I'm hoping for a resolution on this soon, as we all are. We're sending all of our love to the family members.
I feel like the resolution, especially for that one, I mean, it's so frustrating because it's right there. Mm-hmm. It's so close. There's so much information.
Yeah.
There's so much evidence.
Yeah. And if you guys obviously go to her TikTok, you will see all the evidence that we kind of, we were doing. We want to do a larger version of this case once it comes to a resolution where we can tell you about Devon and tell you about the life he lived and who he was to those people who loved him. But until then, we will continue to bring you guys cases into the new year. We love you guys so much, and we thank you again for listening. If you haven't yet, make sure to like, share, subscribe on all platforms. We are wherever you listen to podcasts. We are there. You'll find us. Even if you want to watch us on YouTube, we're there too, except no video right now. But
yeah, reach out to us. We like to have dialogue with you guys, and you guys have brought us a lot of really important cases, a lot of really important information, and let's close out the year with getting some resolution for some people. If you know of anyone that has just been drunk at a party talking shit about something they did, or, I mean, we are a platform that can bring that forth. So
yeah, and even if you want to just contact us, we can, set you up with the right people of who to talk to. And as we close this year out and we end our last episode of 2024, we just wanted to send our heart and love out to all the families of the victims who still don't have justice. So with that was episode 61 and the last episode of 2024. So we hope all of you guys are making something delicious for dinner for Christmas.
Ours will be a week late because I can't get my brain around when it is. But
yeah, Mom and I aren't celebrating till next week apparently. But we love all of you guys, and we continue to thank you guys for all your continued support. And with that, episode 61 of Murder with My Mother, True Crime Podcast, where I talk murder with my mother. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.